Hello everybody and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be taking a look at the first reveals from the Stellar Miracle set. That's going to be released in July in Japan and then around early September for us in English. So we're still a ways off from seeing these cards. These were revealed last night overnight for me at least in the Japan Championships 2024. Only 8 card reveals, but the cards they did reveal are very impactful, all around the Stellar Terra type, which we'll talk a little about when we talk about Terapagos EX. But the first card I'm going to talk about, because it kind of sets the scene, is actually this trainer card. It's a stadium card called Area Zero Under Depths. If a player has a Terra Pokemon in play, that player can have 8 Pokemon on their bench. So you can see this is basically a spiritual successor to Skyfield, which I think is arguably one of the best stadiums we've ever seen. There's argument for a few others, Forest of Giant Plants, Broken Time Space, Chaotic Swell, but I think Skyfield is definitely up there because it breaks a fundamental mechanic of the game in that you can only have 5 bench Pokemon. This, pushing you up to 8, is absolutely absurd. You'll see when we talk about Terapagos that that's really going to help its damage output. And there's not masses of things to say about this other than talking about Terapagos. The one thing I did want to mention just before we actually talk about the EX though is this could also just be really good for some archetypes that like to take a lot of Pokemon off the bench. Basically you can play an Area Zero Under Depths, put a load of 1 prize Pokemon down, then find a way of bouncing that Area Zero Under Depths, and all of a sudden you have to then limit yourself back down to 5. You can maybe discard some EXs that have tanked hits and stuff like that as well. So there's multiple different uses for this, but the primary reason we're going to see this in Dex is going to be because of this Terapagos EX, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's a 230 HP colorless basic Terra EX Pokemon, that's a mouthful, with 2 attacks. You can see this first attack is pretty standard, but the second attack has pretty nifty energy cost. That's kind of the sort of the selling point of the gimmick behind these Stellar Terra Pokemon. They have quite a complicated attack cost for at least one of their attacks. And typically those attacks also have a pretty powerful effect as well, because obviously it's quite difficult to get the energy on them. We do see a couple of cards in here that are going to support that, but regardless, just keep in mind that that's kind of the gimmick, very similar to the crystal Pokemon that we've seen of the past in like the Skyridge days. So a nice little nod to them. But yeah, Terapagos EX, like I say, 230 HP, so already on the larger side for basic Pokemon HP wise, has the unified beatdown attack for 2 colorless that does 30 damage, times the number of your benched Pokemon. You can't use this on your first turn going second. Obviously this is quite an easy attack to set up, so I can understand why they've added that text in, though it is quite funny that we have things like Roaring Moon, Iron Hands, even like the Miraidons and stuff that arguably can do just as strong attacks turn 1, if not stronger in some situations. But I think this line of text was added basically because it's just a DTE to be able to attack with Terapagos, which is really easy. It's just a basic Pokemon, 1 energy attachment from a double turbo, and all of a sudden you're able to unified beatdown. So I can kind of see why they did that. Obviously, this is the same attack as Mega Rayquaza, but on a basic, which is absolutely nuts. Mega Rayquaza was the best deck in format for a while when it was first released and was kind of relevant pretty much throughout its whole tenure. There was multiple different counters to it, and it still saw a huge amount of play. So having Mega Ray's attack on a basic is absurd. You'll also see that there's ways of being able to make this quite tanky as well, which is quite interesting. So it's kind of like a Mega Ray with arguably more HP. You're able to like maybe pick this up and cycle it, which is quite impressive. I think it's kind of obvious how strong this is going to be. Really, really sort of low to the ground basic attacking deck that's going to be quite consistent. We've had some discussion already about what this could be. Is this just going to be like a hyper aggressive 4 double turbo kind of build? And I think that will potentially exist, but I think there's also argument to sort of compare this to a Zoropod style deck, which was obviously the best deck in format when it was around, at least for a very long time, which was kind of this deck that drew quite a few cards, was able to find specific pieces that it needed when it needed them, was able to use things like Acerola to sort of waste opponents' turns, and you'll be able to see with a couple of the cards that we can combine with this Terapagos, that's going to be pretty viable. So you could basically become like a new Zoropod deck, but again, you're using basic Pokemon instead of Stage 1 Pokemon, which is obviously brilliant. It's going to mean that you're able to hopefully cycle these attackers a lot quicker. Obviously, may have a lower amount of, or like a smaller damage cap because of things like double turbo, but Area Zero Under Depths is going to at least put you to potentially 220 with a full bench, which is crazy. And again, being able to do that on a basic Pokemon is pretty impressive. So yeah, feels like it could be Could go one of two ways. I'm putting my money on sort of the Zoropod, picking it up with Penny, cycling style way to try and really lean into the bulk that this Terapagos can have. Obviously, you've got things like the Bravery Charm to put it up to 280, and then the Buffalant that we'll talk about momentarily also reduces the amount of damage this takes by 60. So that effectively gives you 340 HP on a basic, which is nuts. You've got other sort of ace specs, we'll talk about one momentarily, that really helps Terra Pokemon, but you've got things like Maximum Belt, you've got things like the Hero's Cape. You've got lots of different options for these basic Pokemon. You've got things like Prime Catcher to try and gust something up once you've maybe picked it up with Penny, so you can do a Penny plus gusting play. There's a huge amount of options for this. So yeah, I'm falling on the side of probably just like a quad DT build, similar to those kinds of Zoropod decks of old, maybe some type energy here and there just to help with Crown Opal potentially, but all in all, yeah, obviously a really, really strong attack. And that's just the first attack. The second attack, Crown Opal, for 3 energy, is a Grass, Water, and Lightning. Does 180, and during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from attacks from your opponent's basic non-colorless Pokemon. So quite complicated. Still goes like evolution Pokemon go through, and the colorless Pokemon still go through. So Terapagos can still hit Terapagos, but yeah, pretty powerful attack. Again, for 3 energy, 180 is a decent amount of damage. Obviously, it's quite difficult to get there, but you'll see momentarily we have ways of aiding that. I think there's maybe a world where there's more like there's a proper real tanky build of Terapagos which really plays around Crown Opal and doesn't let these other 2-prize Pokemon like the Miraidons and the Iron Hands and the Chien Pows and all of that kind of stuff touch you, and or you can only deal with this with evolution Pokemon. I think there's a world where that may be a deck, but I don't think that sounds quite as reliable as just being able to cycle Terapagos after Terapagos over and over again with Unified Beatdown. So yeah, we might see this attack still see play. As you'll see when we talk about the Sparkling Crystal, you can reduce the attacks cost down. The attack cost of the Terra Pokemon this card is attached to is reduced by 1 of any type of energy. So basically any Terra Pokemon can now attack for 1 energy less, and you can choose which energy it is. Obviously, great synergy with these Stellar Pokemon that look like they're going to have very complicated attack costs, but also things like Charizard, things like Dragapult. These are stage 2 Pokemon. Charizard less so because you have energy acceleration, but Dragapult in particular has a really awkward energy cost of Psychic Fire. Now, decks have found ways of mitigating that really easily, but just being able to attack with a Dragapult for 1 energy is crazy. That's really, really strong. I think there are better ace specs out there for the Dragapult deck, but that just kind of shows that this isn't just a Terapagos tool. This can be for any Terra Pokemon, so there's lots of options with this, and I think we have to potentially look at some of these other Terra Pokemon that we've initially sort of written off at the past, especially ones with a colorless attack cost plus like 1 type of energy. Maybe that can be splashed in now. Now, using your ace spec for this kind of effect is, quite expensive. It's not the most versatile spec, but regardless, it is still quite powerful, and maybe it lends to looking at some other Terra Pokemon. Again, I still don't think this is the best way to play Terapagos, but it's an option at least, which is quite cool. And yeah, means that we can maybe look at some other options as well. Also means, like the first one I thought of for that sort of double colorless energy plus a type was Wellspring Ogerpon. You can now Wellspring Ogerpon with just a double turbo and a Sparkling Crystal. Now, whether that's easier to do than actually set up with normal Ogerpon and like energy switch and stuff, it's hard to say. There's only 1 Sparkling Crystal in the deck, so obviously it's quite expensive. But even so, that's kind of how we have to evaluate cards going forward to do with this new Ace Spec tool card. So yeah, quite an interesting one. I don't think it's going to see huge amounts of play, but definitely makes you re-evaluate a lot of different cards, and they're the kind of cards I like, the ones that make you look back at other ones and other cards and kind of work out whether this opens any more doors. Crispin is the supporter that was revealed today. It searches your deck for 2 types of basic energy, and you reveal them to your opponent. You put one of them into your hand and you attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon. Again, obviously really helping with those Stellar Terra Pokemon's attack costs. That's going to really help with Crown Opal. It's going to mean that you can essentially find the 2 energy that you're missing. So if you are playing a deck which plays all 3 of the Grass, Water, and Lightning, you just have to find 1 on turn 1, and then on turn 2 you can Crispin and find the 2 that you're missing and attach them both, and be able to just Crown Opal from turn 2. So that's really impressive. I think the other place this is quite cool is Dragapult. Again, we've just talked about how awkward Dragapult's attack cost is. Being able to play a Crispin, even if it's just a one-of that you can search for with Luminion, means that you can potentially set up a Dragapult in one turn, which is quite cool. The deck already plays things like Vessel, so it kind of competes a little bit, but still being able to Arven and find them, or being able to Crispin and attach them immediately is very strong. I think the more stellar Terra Pokemon we see, the better this card will be. And to be honest, that's fine by me. I don't think this has to be broken straight away. I think this has a huge amount of space for growth. I think it feels similar to like an Arven style card, where initially it wasn't super impactful, but the more and more cards we've got that work well with Arven, the better it's got, and now it's fantastic. I don't think this is going to see the heights of Arven, but I do feel like this kind of card is going to be one that gets better and better over time, and the more options or the more Pokemon we can attach energy to with Crispin, the better it gets. So yeah, really interesting one. Again, this could be another way of being able to just set up Unified Beatdown quite consistently, because you can you don't have to DTE. Maybe you can just run a handful of energy and use Crispin to attach them that way as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. On to the other Pokemon as well then. First off is Fan Rotom. The first one I'm going to talk about is Fan Rotom. It has the Fan Call ability. You can only use the ability on the first turn, where you search your deck for 3 colourless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, reveal them and put them into your hand, then you shuffle your deck. So you can only use this once and on your first turn, so it's quite limiting, but you can Buddy Pop him for this, which is quite nice. I think the kind of things you're going to be looking for are things like the Buffalant and the Noctowl line. Obviously they're the kind of natural synergies they're trying to push with this card, which is going to be pretty impressive. Buffalant is the one that I talked about earlier on that helps reduce damage. It has the Curly Wall ability. It says if you have another Buffalant in play, all of your basic colourless Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks done to your opponent's Pokemon, done by your opponent's Pokemon, sorry. So obviously you can only use one Curly Wall, but regardless, that's a pretty big sort of damage reduction. Just for this, it's 2 bench slots. Normally that would be quite expensive, but with the Area 0 Underdepths, you can you have that space to be able to put 2 of these down. Obviously, if your opponent bumps the stadium, if you discard down to only 1 Buffalant, you're not going to get that that sort of effect anymore. So you're maybe going to have to manage your bench quite carefully. But regardless, it is going to make Terapagos still pretty tanky, and similarly any other sort of colourless Pokemon that you decide to run in the deck. I can see this deck kind of playing a hybrid of colourless Pokemon, and then maybe if you're playing an energy type, some element of attackers of that energy type. If you're playing water type, maybe some attackers that are water types and stuff like that. But so you won't always have that protection and everything. But then this may just be a deck that is purely colourless type, because there is also a fantastic Noctowl as well with the Dual Hunt ability that says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during a turn, if you have any Terra Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards, reveal them and put them into your hand. So this is effectively Shady Dealings, or Inteleon's Shady Dealings, but on a stage 1. Obviously it does have the downside of having to have a Terra in play, but the Terapagos deck is going to have 4 Terapagos in the deck, so you're always going to be able to find them, and it may even have some other Terra Pokemon just to make sure that your Area 0 Underdepths isn't bounced by your opponent just taking out your only Terapagos. So it may have like a handful of other one or 2 Terra EX Pokemon. Again, kind of tying in with if you want to play a certain energy type, maybe some Ogerpons or something like that, for example. So you should always hopefully have this this condition active, and because of that, you can kind of read this as essentially Shady Dealings, but the Inteleon version on the Drizzile, which is crazy. Stage 1 Shady Dealings, like Drizzile was already fantastic. Being able to get 2 trainers is just absurd. This is kind of how I envisage you being able to search for things like switching cards plus Penny and stuff like that to be able to pick up your Terapagos after it's taken a hit, maybe being able to search out for your A-Spec plus Penny and stuff like that. So the only thing it can't find is the double turbos. I think that's going to be the heart and soul of this deck, is can we find a consistent way of finding double turbos, or does it have to be another way of attaching energy and accelerating energy? But that being said, that sounds like a pretty good problem to have if you're able to cover everything else. You have great Pokemon search on turn 1 with the Rotom to find multiple Hoots and maybe even a Noctowl for the following turn, finding a Buffalant and stuff. You have great ways of then being able to search for all the trainers with the Noctowl, so you just need to find those double turbos. So yeah, the deck sounds fantastic. I think it's going to be it's going to have an immediate impact on the format. I think we've only seen 8 cards, but this set is already going to have a real big swing in sort of how things go forward. Interestingly, we're yet to see any other like Terra Pokemon or Stellar Terra Pokemon officially, but there were some sort of leaks a little while ago. So some of those may sort of start to get revealed over the next few weeks, and it'll be interesting to see how they look. Initially, this one was kind of revealed early, and it didn't look that impressive. Unified Beatdown seemed quite tame, but now obviously we've seen the new stadium, Area Zero Under Depths. It makes a lot of sense as to why this attack had to be nerfed and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Some of those cards that may initially have seemed a bit underpowered could in fact be really strong. So yeah, it's going to be really cool to see. I think this set is going to be really exciting. I'm not going to Worlds this year, so I'm going to be cracking on with testing this with Joe, hopefully. Basically, as soon as we have all of the cards, which should be in about a month's time, which will be exciting. I'm sure there'll be lots of videos on the channel as well. So yeah, it's going to be pretty cool stuff. Can't wait to try out some Terrapagos. Zoropod 2.0, Mega Ray 2.0. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments which do you think this is going to be more like. Do you think this is going to be powerful, or do you think this has been a bit overrated? I feel like a lot of people have been really excited about these cards, but maybe they've been overrated. What do you think? Let me know, and I will see you guys in another video shortly. Thanks for watching.